Winning your fantasy football leagues means drafting league-winning breakouts, and these are guys that this year are primed for a breakout season, so you should target them in your fantasy football drafts or in your fantasy football trades if you've already drafted to make sure that it gives you a good shot at winning your league this year. Do us a huge favor. Down in the pinned comment is our draft guide. If you haven't drafted yet, feel free to use that. The only thing we ask is that you subscribe to the channel and make sure right now, drop a like on this video if you play fantasy football and if you want more content like this, us giving you advice on who to draft, breakouts, etc. We appreciate you doing those two things for us today. But let's talk about some breakouts here. Let's talk about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And this is a guy, when we were in Austin, Texas with all the flock guys, we were talking about Jaxon Smith-Njigba a whole freaking lot. Nathan and I are really excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Nathan and I were excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba last year. Last year, we should not have been excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba because little did we know.
Thanks, Lockett.
I know. Little did we know that Tyler Lockett is immortal. The bald head, that is going to cultivate immortality in Tyler Lockett. He's just always going to be good, evidently.
It was actually Shane Waldron more than Tyler Lockett because really Lockett regressed last year. He did not look that great.
No, it really was. Because this is a guy that was 41st in the league in targets last year, 93 targets, which you look at that for a rookie and you're like, actually, that's not that bad, which is true. However, his ADOT was 6.1. That is 95th in the NFL last year. Bad. He, a lot of his targets are at the line of scrimmage, getting a lot of screen passes, getting a lot of really short targets. He had only 10 deep targets in the entire year. He had only 9 red zone targets. Granted, the target quality rating was 62nd in the league. He didn't really underperformed based on the opportunity he was given, but the opportunity was not near good enough, right? He was 51st in receiving yards last year and 36th in the league in receptions. He had 63 receptions. He was bringing in a lot of those receptions that he had on targets. However, it was because a lot of them were easy throws. And so he was 21st in the league last year in YAC, which is pretty impressive given that he was 51st in receiving yards. So that's...
Did you say 23rd?
21st in the league.
Nice.
He had 4 yards after catch per target.
Sounds like a pretty good slot wide receiver to me.
He is. And so really what needs to change this year for JSN? He needs to get more targets. I think this is happening. You saw JSN last year come off the field a lot when Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf were on the field. I think that this year they're going to be willing to run more and more 3 wide receiver sets. I think you're going to see JSN on the field for those, and I think JSN is going to be more heavily targeted and heavily featured in this year's Seattle Seahawks passing game. I think that the new coaching staff loves JSN, and I think JSN refusing to talk about the old coaching staff tells you all you need to know about how he was being utilized and what the vibe was there.
Hey, at least he's keeping his mouth shut. He's not crapping on anyone. He's just like, I just don't want to talk about it.
I totally get it.
I'd rather not.
And so for this year, what do we need to see from JSN for him to break out? A, more volume. I think you're going to get it. B, a higher ADOT. I think you're going to get that as well. They're going to utilize him better. This is a guy that can stretch the field. He can do anything. He's a slot wide receiver, but he is extremely versatile, right? A little bit of Josh Downs in his game. Those guys have kind of the same game in that they're both slot wide receivers. They're both really good at some things, but they also can both be vertical threats if needed. JSN is the same way. If you get those things for JSN this year, JSN is probably going to be a top 36 wide receiver. He's currently being drafted as a wide receiver 40, sometimes 50s, but most of the time in the 40s. I think the top 36 wide receiver season for JSN this year is almost a lock. And so in my fantasy drafts, I'm targeting JSN.
Ryan Grubb, the former OC for the Washington Huskies, I know college is different than the NFL, obviously, but it was awesome to see 3 wide receivers be like lethal threats in that offense last year with Polk, McMillan, and Odunze. Yep. And now he's the new OC for the Seahawks, right?
Interesting.
And there's a pre-established connection there with Mike McDonald, who's the head coach, with Ryan Grubb. They go back to, I think, days at like Michigan. Mm-hmm. So look, I think it's just going to be a more well-oiled machine. It's not going to look as broken as last year did, where it was just like, what's going on? These play calls don't make any sense. Like they're just not happening at the right time. It was just kind of like a broken record, honestly. This year, I think it's going to look a lot better, and I think you're going to see multiple receivers be productive in that offense. Then we got Rashee Rice here. I do want to stress something here that I think is really important to focus on. If you are playing in a non-PPR format, I'm not really going out of my way to smash JSN and Rashee Rice in drafts.
No.
Because these guys, again, I mean, we just talked about JSN being top 24 in the league in YAC last year, despite his limited opportunity. You generally see that with slot wide receivers where they have a lot of YAC ability that like really, really good slot wide receivers, not guys that are just exclusive and limited in their skill sets, but guys that are able to make something out of nothing consistently. And Rashee Rice was one of those guys this year as a slot wide receiver, or in 2023, he was third in the league in YAC as a rookie. That is unreal. I mean, talk about unprecedented, unexpected. Like, Rashee Rice, the only reason he was being drafted last year at a decent price is because he was on a Chiefs offense. And at that point, it was like, we were kind of annoyed with all the Chiefs receivers being pushed up boards because they weren't doing anything. Like Sky Moore before him, Mecole Hardman before him. It was just annoying. And Rashee Rice didn't have, anything pretty from a profile perspective as a college prospect. So now we're heading into 2024 where he has a breakout rookie year. Honestly, we're expecting, I think, a next level up for Rashee Rice this year, because honestly, even though he had a pretty good season last year, a lot of his consistent production didn't come out until the second half of the season, and his usage was pretty low. Like, that's why it was so impressive for him to be third in the league in YAC, is because he didn't even have like the snap percentage rates, like over 50% for a while. No, it was really impressive to see him be as productive as he was consistently. And now you go into 24. I know you want to take everything in preseason with a grain of salt, but to see Rashee Rice get 6 straight targets in the preseason while Mahomes is on the field and while Xavier Worthy's on the field, while Travis Kelce's on the field, Pacheco on there as well, like that is exactly what Rashee Rice is going to do. And that's why we did this video with projections on polarizing offenses where there's a lot of mouths to feed. And the Chiefs was one of those offenses. We couldn't, it didn't matter how conservative or aggressive we were with Rashee Rice and his production. He always landed on top. He always ended up being the most productive receiver in that offense just because he has such a safe floor with his consistent target volume and his YAC ability. I think that's really what you want to focus on with Rashee Rice. If you're in a half PPR, a full PPR, you want to be taking him right now, because the only reason he's still going at a discount is because of all those concerns preseason. I know he's still being pushed up boards more and more, so you're not going to see him going at as much of a discount as he was like in June, July, but he's still a really good price in my opinion. And I think at this point, as an actual player, not just price-wise, as an actual player and fantasy asset, I've grown on him more than I ever expected to, because I wasn't super high on him going into his second year in the early offseason. But now when you look at his efficiency metrics, I think it's undeniable that being tied to Patrick Mahomes in an Andy Reid offense where they are not afraid to just take short 5 to 10 yard passes and give him to Rashee Rice and just let him do stuff after the catch. Like, I think you're going to see that consistently. He's probably going to get 8+ targets a game.
All right, let's talk about Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas last year at LSU had 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. If you're wondering what he could do for the Jaguars this year, we're the biggest Christian Kirk truthers out there. I've been a Christian Kirk truther since he was in Arizona. I love him. I know that he is the slot guy there. But again, last year the argument was, and the incorrect argument that we did not make for Calvin Ridley, was that Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk couldn't both be productive. This was false. It's still false with Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. is not a slot. He's not. When you look at his reception perception profile, graded out really well at LSU, and this is a guy that can play outside, and I think the Jacksonville Jaguars drafted him to be the X wide receiver there. That's what I think. I think that they're going to line him up outside. I think he's going to be a big play guy. I think that he does have, however, some pretty good route running capabilities that will give him enough targets in the short to intermediate game to not only have that deep threat, not only have that touchdown upside that you saw at LSU last year, but also be productive from a PPR standpoint. And so Brian Thomas is a guy that, unlike Rashee Rice, unlike JSN, I think he has more touchdown upside than those guys. And I think that even though Christian Kirk can still be productive, get a lot of targets, and Evan Ingram can still be productive, I just think what you're going to have there is a very highly concentrated offense. And with Brian Thomas, I think from a talent perspective, this is a guy that most people thought coming into the NFL could be a 1. I think Brian Thomas could be the 1 in Jacksonville.
They drafted him to be
not start the year, because Christian Kirk's not a true 1, right? Christian Kirk is a slot wide receiver. He is a good, really good slot wide receiver. But do they have a dominant X? No, they don't have a dominant 1 either. And I think Brian Thomas could be that guy. I think they drafted him to be that guy. And this year, I think if he does get the target volume to go along with the touchdowns, there's almost no chance he doesn't finish as a top 36 wide receiver, which I think would be fantastic. And I think at the price you're getting him at, which is like 7th round right now in sleeper drafts, a little bit later in some of the other drafts, depending on where you're drafting and what platform you're on, I think that this is a really good price. I don't like drafting a ton of rookies, so make sure you only draft 1 to 2 rookies on your team. But with that being said, of the rookies that I have been drafting this year, Brian Thomas has been one of my most drafted rookies. And so Brian Thomas, go get him in your fantasy leagues, because I think he could have a breakout rookie year.
I think Calvin Ridley was a really great experiment for us to observe last year in the Jaguars offense because you had 3 big names that were all commanding a significant amount of volume, and every single one of them produced. So Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram as a tight end was the lead receiving asset there from a target volume perspective. And this year it's basically, do you think that Gabe Davis is going to be that third guy, or do you think it's going to be Brian Thomas? We lean Brian Thomas because we think talent is going to transcend even though he's younger. Some would say Gabe Davis is probably going to be the third option while they ease Brian Thomas into his role. I think that's reasonable, but I would just rather not bet on the guy who's consistently underperformed since he came into the league and just go get the fresh rookie and Brian Thomas, who's more talented. Next guy we're going to have here is James Cook. I think he's a clear breakout candidate this year because of the type of offense that Buffalo is going to run this year, which is very counter to what they've been doing for the last 5 years with Josh Allen. Because let's be honest, Buffalo is tired of losing in the playoffs and not getting to the AFC Championship and not being able to get past Kansas City. So what did they do? They tried to follow Kansas City's blueprint in their path to the Super Bowl the last couple of years. And that is have an elite tight end. They go and they get Dalton Kincaid, who basically they want to be their own Travis Kelce. And they go and they get a pretty explosive running back with a receiving skill set who going into his third year is probably has a more positive outlook than he's ever had in the past. And they go and they change OCs as well, who when you saw what they did the second half of the season last year, they ran out of a lot of 12 personnel where they were a very run-first offense. And Stephon Diggs became less of a focal point because even though Josh Allen was kind of playing hero ball to an extent, they were able to be a little more versatile across the board by kind of building through this run game. So you've got James Cook as your dual receiving and rushing threat, and then you've got Ray Davis, who they even take this year, who I think could be a guy who's going to get some opportunity this year as well. So I think it's an interesting situation to look at. If anything, James Cook has a pretty safe floor. Do I think he has this crazy elite upside? No, but I think he could outproduce what he's done the last couple of years pretty comfortably, because I think this is an offense that's going to be built for his type of skill set, just like Dalton Kincaid. Those are probably going to be our top 2 guys that we're focusing on from a fantasy perspective in Buffalo this year.
Yeah,
not named Josh Allen.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Devon Achane. Devon Achane, obviously last year had one of the most efficient rookie running back seasons of all time, if not the most efficient. The problem was he only played 11 games. And so this would be his breakout year because he has to put this together over an entire season. He has to stay healthy. He has to stay on the field, and he has to maintain at least a level of efficiency that will put him as a top 12 running back if he does play the entire season. With that being said, let's talk about his price. If he's going at the 1-2 turn, I'm not taking him there. He's been going there in underdog drafts. Don't touch him. Don't want him there. Anywhere like mid to late second and beyond into the third, he is a must draft there because of his upside. When you're looking just at the efficiency last year, this is a dude that had 8 touchdowns plus 3 receiving touchdowns, so 11 total touchdowns in 11 games played. He had a touchdown in every game he played. His snap share wasn't even that great in the games he did play. The highest he got in a game was like 60%. 63%, and the rest of his games he's still playing 40, 50% of the snaps, and he's still averaging 11 yards, 12 yards, 13 yards, 4 yards, 6 yards, 7 yards, and you saw that come down at the end of the season, but per carry. This is a guy on a per carry basis, one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL last year, and so if he does play an entire season and he is that efficient, he will win you your fantasy league. There's no question about it. Because this is a guy last year that if he were to have done what he did over an entire season, well, it would have been a top 3 running back easy last year. And this year, he can be a top 3 running back. I think that is his ceiling. I think it's unlikely that he ends up as like a top 3 running back, but I think a mid running back 1 is very likely, and he's being drafted right now as like the running back 8 through 12 on most platforms. And at that price, again, if you're getting him anywhere from the late second and beyond, which you may not now, Devon Achane is a smash. This is a guy that I think this year, playing in one of the best offenses, you want pieces of this offense, you want running backs in this offense. They scored a ton of touchdowns. Mike McDaniel's going to use committees here. However, Devon Achane, if he plays an entire season, if he's this efficient, he's going to win you your fantasy league this year.
And we got Brock Bowers, another rookie here. Obviously, everyone knows, tight end from Vegas. That situation's disgusting. Gardner Minshew's going to be the starting quarterback, which is not as bad as some people are making it out to be because you just saw multiple productive assets in the Colts offense last year with Gardner Minshew. He provides enough volume where I think Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers can both be productive, and I think Jacoby Myers can get a little bit in there as well. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what Brock Bowers does from like a skill set perspective, right? Where does he line up consistently? Is he really going to be all over the place like we saw in preseason? Will he line up in the backfield? Will he line up on the line? Will he line up in the slot and on the outside and just be driving DCs absolutely crazy? I think that's possible. I think that could be one of the reasons why the Raiders decided to draft him when they have, team need literally everywhere else. Brock Bowers is kind of a luxury item from a NFL perspective, but when you're looking at fantasy football, I actually have kind of grown on a situation a little bit and think that they're going to use him. And when you're getting him at price right now, anywhere from like, depending on where you're drafting, Sleeper, Yahoo, ESPN, etc., like you're getting them anywhere from the 8th round, which I think is a fine price, to the 11th round, which I think is an absolute steal. When this guy legit as a rookie tight end, because of his versatility of skill sets on the field, has the upside to be a top 6 tight end, right? Like we're not talking about a Kyle Pitts who's just ready to go as a dominant receiving asset. We're talking about a guy that can run the freaking football and be a slot receiver and be an X. Like, this is ridiculous. I wish there was a better quarterback throwing him the ball, but regardless, I think he is absolutely, undeniably a breakout candidate this year, whether you like that situation or not.
Let's talk about Isaiah Pacheco. This is one we've been a little bit hesitant on because he's climbed up into the 2nd round in a lot of leagues. But I have seen you get him in the 3rd here, still consistently in sleeper leagues at least. And with Pacheco, this is a guy last year that was 13th in snap share and 8th in opportunity share, not to mention 12th in touchdowns, and still only finished as the running back 16.5 PPR leagues. Okay, so I have plenty of questions myself about Pacheco. But when you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and how they've been running their offense in the last year, and kind of the shift in style that they've gone from, Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball every single play. Patrick Mahomes should throw in the ball 45 times a game and having a ton of touchdowns every year. You saw last year Patrick Mahomes take a little bit of a step back, and a lot of it was because the focus in the Kansas City Chiefs offense was run through the ground game. And Isaiah Pacheco is the guy for the ground game in Kansas City. And so just purely based on the fact that you are drafting the best running back, the number 1 running back that's going to get the most opportunity in one of the best offenses in the league, playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the league, that's what Isaiah Pacheco brings you. Obviously, you'll have to see the touchdowns. 9 touchdowns last year. You'll have to see that go up for him to break out and really win you fantasy leagues this year. But this is a guy that was 7th in the league last year in red zone touches, okay? So it's not like they weren't giving him the opportunity. It's going to be, can Isaiah Pacheco improve? Can he, with more volume, score more fantasy points on a per-touch basis? Because it's 0.84 fantasy points per opportunity last year, which needs to go up for him to be in the elite range. But with that being said, this guy was 11th in breakaway runs. So he's got big playability. He's got the volume. If he can put together the touchdowns and also the receptions are a huge one here. And because we look at the receptions, and this is really what adds to a running back's production profile. Not really super good last year. He was 29th in routes run. He was 36th in yards per reception. He's 26th in target share. And then overall in receptions, he was 17th. He had 44 receptions, which was 3 per game. We'd like to see that go up to at least 4 per game.
And can Andy Reid stay away from using another day 3 undrafted running back, or Will he? Can he help himself?
Is Carson Steele going to take Isaiah Pacheco's job? That's
not take it? No, just eat into the workload. It's such an Andy Reid thing to do.
I mean, where was Isaiah Pacheco drafted? Right?
Exactly.
So it's not like he was a great prospect, but this year could be a good pick in fantasy football drafts.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker could be too. Honestly, seeing where he's fallen in some drafts, he's grown on me a little bit. And I think if we're going to talk about JSN and his situation getting better, I think that has to apply to every asset in that offense, and that includes the running backs there. And I think Kenneth Walker is undeniably the first option there. I don't really know if Ryan Grubb is going to want to feature a bell cow running back, or if he'll want to have a true committee like it was originally intended with Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker there. But what I do know is that Kenneth Walker at the end of the 5th round is a really good pick at price. I think that's a really good pick. If you're getting him 4 or 5 turn right around where Mixon's going, I think that's more disgusting and sort of iffy.
Okay pick.
It's fine, especially if you kind of fade running back in the first few rounds and then you have to go Mixon and Walker there at the turn. That's whatever with me. I've had to do that a couple of times. But I mean, in the Flock League, like Kenneth Walker fell to the middle of the 6th rounds and you didn't even want to take him.
No.
And I was like, take him. he's right there. Like, he's one of the last guys that has demonstrated in decent sample sizes that he can be pretty productive, and he has, you know, some explosive playability as well in an offense that I think just overall is going to be a better situation in 2024 compared to 23. If we can get back to like the overall production as a whole in that offense, to like where we were in 2022, I think you're looking at a pretty good outlook for Kenneth Walker. The biggest reason that he's falling is because he has not been able to consistently stay healthy the last 2 years, and he has to do that. He absolutely has to do that. If he stays on the field for 14, 15 games this year, I think you're looking at a guy that has, you know, low-end running back one upside.
All right, this is an obvious one. Drake London is on this list, and Drake London, basically, this is what I'm going to say about him. He has the route running capability and success rate, according to reception perception, to be a dominant wide receiver one in the NFL. He has the size to be a dominant X in the NFL. He now has the quarterback to be a dominant wide receiver in the NFL. This is a guy that has played last year, the offensive coordinator, to be a dominant wide receiver in the NFL. Last year, playing with Desmond Ridder. In the past 2 years, playing with Taylor Heineke, right?
Hey, by the way, Desmond Ridder, the Cardinals went and traded for Desmond Ridder, and then they cut him because he's that bad. He's that bad. He will no longer be in the NFL.
Still got 117, 110 targets in his first 2 years and put up 800 and 900 yards respectively as well. Only had 4 touchdowns in his first year and 2 in his second year. And you're going to see Drake London, like he should as a 6'4", 215-pound receiver, get more red zone targets. That's the key. I'm not worried about the targets at all. Drake London's going to have 130 targets this year. Book it. And for an X, that's really good. Mm-hmm. If he has 130 targets and he scores 6 touchdowns, he's wide receiver one.
Yep. Absolutely
no question. Write it down. I don't even care. I mean, when you're looking at even the yards per target last year, it was not very high for Drake London. I mean, this is for an X wide receiver, 43rd in the league in ADOT. 11.5. Because you know why? Because Desmond Ridder can't throw it more than 12 yards.
This has got to be one of the most short-sighted takes about Drake London that I've seen. Where like not your take,
thanks,
not our take. The take of like Drake London hasn't done anything the past 2 years, so why would I draft him now? Projecting a third-year breakout. Are you kidding me? Like his talent transcended. This isn't like a Nico Collins type projection where he honestly his first couple years of the year he didn't do. Not only did he not do anything, he never really showcased anything talent wise. And Drake London, despite legit one of the worst quarterback situations for 2 straight years, has demonstrated like not just highlight level plays, like consistent target volume in games where they like they're not even capable of passing the ball, but also Arthur Smith doesn't want to pass the ball and he's still getting targets there and he's intercepting balls from corners consistently. Like this is not it technically is a projection, but this is a pretty easy projection to a point where like it is absolutely merited that Drake London's price is where it is right now. And if you're just straight up passing on him consistently and you're doing multiple fantasy drafts and you're not just at least taking a shot on him once, you're wrong.
Take him. You have to. Take a Drake London this year. I promise you. Come back to this video. All
yep. Right. Last one is going to... Honestly, you could put every single Packers wide receiver into this offense. We'll go Wicks, Reed, and Dobbs. If you want to take the cheapest guy, it's Wicks. If you want to go with the guy that was the lead wide receiver last year as a rookie, it's Reed. If you want to go with the guy that actually has like the size to be an X... it's Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. Like Romeo Doubs isn't a bad size either. So I think any one of these 4 guys is a fine shot to take because every one of their prices is pretty reasonable this year in fantasy football. I don't even like Christian Watson. I don't think he's an absolutely horrible price. If I were to project out, I'd say that he's production-wise the second or third guy there. But I don't think it's terrible. Dontavion Wicks is the guy that produced the least last year, but he was the most efficient with limited volume, limited opportunity, and that opportunity is going to go up this year. It's just a matter of what does LaFleur want to do? Does he really want to make it a 1A, 1B, 1C, 1Ds, or does he want to actually have like a true wide receiver one there with complementary second, third, and fourth options? It's to be determined. We don't really know, but I think you're looking at that offense is going to be one of the better offenses in the NFC this year, and you would just by default assume that at least one of them is going to have a pretty solid, pretty productive season. And I think Wicks could be one of those guys. I think any one of those guys could be that guy.
And so. I think any of these guys, and I bet when we come back to this list at the end of the year, there will be at least one of these guys, maybe probably 2, 3, or 4, that ended up winning your fantasy leagues this
5,
year.
6, 7, 8?
Yeah, 7, 8, 9.
I got it.
Yeah, you did get it. All right. Make sure you drop a like on this video and make sure you check out our draft guide in the comments and subscribe. We appreciate you doing those 2 things. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.